Some of the most beautiful love stories in Hollywood were never real. At least, not in the way the world believed them to be. From the outside, these marriages looked flawless, filled with glamour, passion, and the kind of perfection people only dream about. But behind closed doors, a very different truth was quietly unfolding. A truth shaped by silence, hidden lives, and emotional distance that no one could see. These were not just relationships built on love, but sometimes on illusion. And for the women inside them, the heartbreak was not loud or scandalous, it was something far more painful. The slow, quiet realization that the person they loved was never completely theirs. Number 1, Princess Margaret. Princess Margaret had spent her entire life being watched. Every smile, every choice, every moment of happiness was examined as if it belonged not just to her, but to the world. So when she married Anthony Armstrong-Jones, it felt like something different. Something modern, alive, and chosen on her own terms. He was creative, charismatic, and far removed from the rigid traditions that surrounded royalty. To the public, their marriage looked refreshing, almost like proof that even within the constraints of the crown, real love could still exist. Together, they seemed vibrant, unconventional, and deeply connected. For a while, it may have felt exactly that way. But some marriages don't break all at once. They slowly shift. Quietly, almost invisibly, until the distance between two people becomes impossible to ignore. Over time, Armstrong-Jones's private life began to appear far more complicated than the image he presented. Later accounts would suggest that his emotional world, and the life he lived beyond public view, did not fully align with the role he was expected to play as a husband. Whether Margaret understood that from the beginning is something no one can say for certain. What feels more likely is that she entered the marriage hoping for something real, something steady, something honest, something that truly belonged to her. And that is where the deeper sadness begins to take shape, because the heartbreak is not simply that her husband may have carried parts of himself she could never fully reach, it's that a woman who had already lived under constant scrutiny may have stepped into one of the most important relationships of her life, only to find herself facing a different kind of loneliness, not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being with someone who was never completely there, and sometimes, that kind of silence leaves the deepest mark of all. Number 2, Judy Garland. Judy Garland was loved by millions, but admiration has never guaranteed peace in private. By the time she married Vincente Minnelli in 1945, she was already one of the most recognizable women in the world. Her voice carried emotion in a way few others could, and her presence on screen made her feel almost untouchable. To the public, she was radiant, unforgettable, almost larger than life, and when she and Minnelli came together, it seemed like the perfect match. He was refined, talented, and rising quickly as a director. She was luminous, deeply admired, and still hopeful that love might finally bring her the stability she had long been searching for. From the outside, their marriage looked like the union of two brilliant artistic souls, elegant, sophisticated, and full of promise. For a time, it may have truly felt that way, but appearances often protect a marriage more than they explain it. As the years passed, Minnelli's private life began to be understood in a far more complex light. Later accounts would describe a man whose emotional and romantic world did not fully fit the expectations of a conventional husband. His inner life seemed layered, guarded, not easily shared. Whether Judy fully understood that from the beginning is something no one can say with certainty. What feels easier to believe is that she entered the marriage hoping for something complete, something steady, something honest, something that could finally feel like home. And that is where the quiet sadness begins, because the heartbreak is not simply that there may have been truths she didn't fully see, it's that a woman who gave so much of herself to the world may have spent part of her own marriage reaching for a kind of closeness that never fully came back to her. And sometimes, the deepest loss isn't loud or dramatic, it's the slow realization that something essential was missing all along. Number 3. Angela Lansbury. Angela Lansbury was still very young when she married Richard Cromwell, yet she already carried a maturity that made her seem older than her years. She was intelligent, focused, and quietly determined, already stepping into Hollywood with a sense of direction that many never find so early in life. From the outside, the marriage looked simple, even respectable. A rising young actress and an established man who seemed to offer stability and guidance. It felt like the kind of union that could gently settle into a normal life away from the chaos of Hollywood ambition. But some relationships collapse not with noise, but with silence. The marriage lasted only a short time, just months, before it ended. To the public, it was confusing. Too quick to fully understand, too brief to explain in simple terms. Later reflections on Cromwell's life, and his place in Hollywood's hidden history, added layers of complexity to how that marriage was seen. Over time, what once looked like a straightforward romantic connection began to feel more uncertain. More emotionally mismatched than anyone likely realized at the beginning. Whether Angela understood all of this when she entered the marriage is something no one can say with certainty. What feels more likely is that she stepped into it with belief in stability, belief in partnership, belief in the idea that adulthood begins with something solid to hold on to. And that is where the emotional weight of her story begins, because the heartbreak is not in the short length of the marriage itself, it's in the possibility that she entered it with sincerity, only to discover that sincerity alone is not always enough to hold two lives together. Some disappointments don't arrive as explosions, they arrive quietly. In the slow realization that what you thought was forming was never fully complete to begin with. Number 4. Phyllis Gates. Phyllis Gates was not an outsider to Hollywood. She understood how carefully image and reality were separated inside the industry, and how much effort went into maintaining appearances. So when she married Rock Hudson in 1955, it seemed like a story that already carried the weight of fame, beauty, and public fascination. He was one of the most desired men in Hollywood. Tall, charismatic, and at the peak of his stardom, Rock Hudson represented everything the studio system wanted in a leading man. And Phyllis, working within that same world, stepped into a marriage that appeared to offer status, stability, and a shared life under the spotlight. From the outside, it looked convincing, almost untouchable, but some marriages begin to feel distant even while they are still new. As time passed, the relationship between them came to seem more complicated than the public image suggested. There was distance, pressure, and a growing sense that something essential was not fully present in the way people expected from a husband and wife. Later revelations about Rock Hudson's private life reshaped how the marriage was understood. What once appeared to be a glamorous Hollywood union was re-examined through a much more complicated lens, one shaped by secrecy, image management, and unspoken truths. Whether Phyllis fully knew, partially sensed, or was kept unaware of the deeper reality is something that has never been completely clear. What feels more important is the emotional experience at the center of it all, because the heartbreak is not only about hidden truths, it's about the possibility of living inside a relationship that looks complete to the world, while quietly feeling incomplete where it matters most. And sometimes, the most difficult part is not what is revealed later, but what is felt in real time. The slow emotional distance that no public image can ever fully hide. Number 5. Barry Baronson. Barry Baronson carried herself with a quiet elegance that felt effortless. She moved through the world of fashion and art with a natural grace, the kind that made people assume she had everything already figured out. She was a model, a photographer, and someone who belonged to a creative circle that valued beauty, intellect, and expression. So when she married Anthony Perkins, it looked like a rare kind of artistic union. He was intelligent, intense, and forever remembered for one of cinema's most iconic and unsettling roles. Together, they appeared to form a couple that was both fascinating and deeply compatible, two creative minds sharing the same world. From the outside, their marriage had a kind of mystery that only made it more interesting. but mystery can feel very different inside a relationship than it does from a distance. As time passed, Anthony Perkins' private life was understood to be far more complex than the public image he had long carried. Later accounts described a man whose emotional and inner world did not always align with the expectations placed on him as a husband in a traditional sense. Whether Barry fully understood all of this at the beginning is something that can never be known with certainty. What feels more likely is that she entered the marriage with openness, a belief in connection, in partnership, and in building a life with someone whose creative spirit matched her own, and that is where the emotional weight of her story quietly settles, because the heartbreak is not just in what may have been hidden or unspoken, it's in the possibility of sharing a life with someone whose inner world remains partly out of reach, someone you can see, someone you can live beside, but never fully access in the way you might expect from love. And sometimes, that kind of emotional distance is the hardest to name, because from the outside, everything still looks like it belongs together. Number 6. Elsa Lanchester. Elsa Lanchester had a presence that was impossible to ignore. She was witty, unconventional, and carried a kind of intelligence that made her feel larger than the roles she played. By the time she married Charles Laughton, she was not simply stepping into someone else's spotlight, she was already a powerful force in her own right. Together, they seemed like one of those rare partnerships built on creativity and depth. He was celebrated, respected, and known for his commanding performances. She was vibrant, sharp, and endlessly memorable. To the outside world, their marriage looked like something unusual, but deeply bonded, a union of two minds that understood each other beyond the ordinary. And for a time, it may have felt complete, but some marriages appear whole only because the surface has been carefully maintained. As the years passed, Charles Laughton's private life came to be seen in a more complex light. Later accounts would suggest that his emotional and romantic world did not fully align with the traditional expectations of a husband. There were layers to his identity that remained guarded, existing just beneath what the public was allowed to see. Whether Elsa fully understood all of that from the beginning is something history cannot clearly answer. What feels more certain is that their marriage existed somewhere between companionship and distance, between genuine connection and something less fully shared. And that is where the quiet sadness of her story begins, because the heartbreak is not simply about what may have been hidden, it's about what may never have been fully given. Elsa Lanchester may have found loyalty, partnership, and even a kind of enduring bond, but those things are not always the same as emotional transparency, and sometimes, loving someone means accepting the parts of them that remain just out of reach, even when those are the parts you needed most to understand. Number 7. Janet Gaynor. Janet Gaynor was one of the earliest true icons of Hollywood, a face that seemed to carry both innocence and quiet strength at the same time. In an era before the industry became louder and more complicated, she represented a softer kind of stardom. Elegant, admired, and instantly recognizable, she felt like someone the world could trust, so when she married Adrian Adolph Greenberg, the match appeared almost perfect. He was the creative force behind some of the most glamorous costumes in film history, a designer whose work helped define the look of an entire era. Together, they seemed like a union shaped by beauty, sophistication, and shared artistic vision. From the outside, everything about their marriage looked carefully arranged and completely right, but sometimes, the more perfect something appears, the less people question what might exist beneath it. As time passed, Adrian's private life came to be understood in a more complex way. Later accounts would suggest that the marriage may not have been a traditional romantic partnership in the way it was presented. Instead, it may have also served another purpose, one shaped by image, discretion, and the expectations of an industry that often demanded appearances over truth. Whether Janet fully understood that when she entered the marriage is something that remains uncertain. What feels more likely is that she believed in it, not as an arrangement, but as something real. Something that offered companionship, stability, and a future she could genuinely hold on to, and that is where the emotional weight of her story begins to settle, because the heartbreak is not simply in what may have been hidden, it's in the possibility of giving yourself to something that looks complete from the outside, while quietly feeling the absence of something essential within it. Janet Gaynor may have had respect, partnership, and a shared life filled with elegance. Number 8. Charlotte Raye. Charlotte Raye built her career on warmth. Even when she played strong or sharp-edged characters, there was always something deeply human in her presence, something that made audiences feel close to her, as if they truly understood who she was. That same openness makes her private life feel even more poignant. When she married John Strauss, it likely seemed like the beginning of something stable and meaningful. A partnership built on creativity, understanding, and shared ambition. From the outside, there was little reason to question it. It looked like a life forming in the way people hope it will, steady, supportive, and real, but some marriages don't fall apart suddenly. They become difficult in quieter ways. Over time, Charlotte Raye came to speak openly about the emotional complexity of her relationship, and the reality that her husband was gay. That honesty changes the way the story is understood, shifting it away from speculation and into something far more personal, because whatever she may have known at the beginning, it is clear that the marriage eventually placed her in a deeply complicated emotional space, a place where love, loyalty, confusion, and loneliness could all exist at once, and that is where the sadness of her story truly lives. Because the heartbreak is not simply about hidden truth, it's about living alongside that truth. Without being able to fully share in it, Charlotte Raye may have tried to build closeness, to hold on to connection, to create something complete from what she had, but some relationships carry a distance that cannot be closed, no matter how much one person gives. And sometimes, the deepest pain is not rejection, it's the quiet realization that you are giving your heart to something that cannot fully return it, a love that exists, but never in the way you needed it to. Number 9. Carol Channing. Carol Channing had a presence that was impossible to overlook. She was vibrant, theatrical, and so unmistakably herself that audiences remembered her the moment she appeared. There was a brightness to her, a sense of joy and confidence that made it seem like she was always in control of her own story. But private life doesn't always follow the same script as the stage. When she built a life with Charles Lowe, the relationship appeared to offer something steady and reassuring. After years in the spotlight, it looked like the kind of partnership that could provide grounding, companionship, loyalty, and a shared sense of stability away from public attention. From the outside, there was little reason to question it, but some truths take time to surface. And when they do, they change everything. As the years passed, the image of the marriage began to feel more complicated than it first appeared. Later accounts would suggest that Charles Lowe's private life carried layers that did not fully align with the role he played publicly. His emotional world, and the reality he lived, seemed more complex than what the marriage outwardly represented. Whether Carol understood the full picture from the beginning is something that remains uncertain. What feels more likely is that she entered the relationship hoping for something real, something complete. Something that could match the openness and energy she gave so freely to the world, and that is where the quiet sadness of her story begins to deepen, because the heartbreak is not simply that something may have been hidden, it's that a woman so full of life, so open, and so emotionally expressive may have spent years inside a relationship that could not fully meet her in return. Carol Channing gave so much of herself, on stage and off, and yet, in her own private life, she may have been living beside a truth that never fully revealed itself to her. Number 10. Martha Raye. Martha Raye lived with a kind of energy that was impossible to ignore. She was bold, loud, and full of life, the kind of woman people assumed could handle anything. On stage and on screen, she projected confidence and strength, a presence so powerful it made vulnerability seem almost unlikely, but strength in public does not always protect the heart in private. When she married Mark Harris, the relationship appeared to offer something steady. After years of fame and attention, it looked like the kind of partnership that could provide loyalty, companionship, and a sense of grounding. From the outside, it seemed simple, even reassuring, but some marriages don't reveal their true shape until much later. As time passed, Mark Harris came to be seen as a far more complicated figure than the role he appeared to play. Later accounts would suggest that his private life held truths that did not fully align with the image of a devoted husband. There were layers to who he was, parts of his life that remained unspoken, existing just beyond what Martha may have fully known. Whether she understood any of that from the beginning is something that remains uncertain. What feels more likely is that she entered the marriage hoping for something real, something dependable, something that could match the strength she brought into it, and that is where the emotional weight of her story begins. Because the heartbreak is not simply about hidden truths, it's about living inside a relationship that appears complete, while quietly feeling that something essential is missing. Martha Raye may have given loyalty, energy, and belief to her marriage, but some relationships carry a silence that no amount of strength can overcome, and sometimes, the deepest loneliness is not about being alone. It's about standing beside someone who cannot fully meet you where it matters most, a life that looks full from the outside. Number 11. Amanda Blake. Amanda Blake had a presence that felt both strong and familiar. On screen, she carried confidence, independence, and a kind of emotional clarity that made audiences trust her instantly. She seemed like someone who understood people. Someone who knew exactly where she stood, and that is part of what makes her private life feel so quietly tragic. When she married Mark Spaeth, the relationship may have seemed like a chance at something steady, something real away from the noise of fame. A partnership built on companionship, trust, and the hope of a shared future that belonged only to them. From the outside, there was no reason to question it, but some heartbreaks only begin to make sense after everything has already changed. Following Spaeth's death, revelations about his private life cast the marriage in a far more complicated and unsettling light. What once appeared to be a straightforward relationship was suddenly seen through a different lens, one shaped by hidden truths and realities that may not have been fully shared. Whether Amanda knew any part of that truth during the marriage remains uncertain. What matters more is the emotional reality that follows such a possibility, because the heartbreak is not only about what was hidden, it's about what may have been denied. The chance to fully understand the person you built your life with, the sense of being truly known in return, the quiet reassurance that what you were living was real in the way you believed it to be. Amanda Blake may have entered the marriage with openness, trust, and sincerity, only to find that some part of that reality existed beyond her reach, and sometimes, the most painful truth is not what comes to light, but the realization that it was always there, just never fully yours to see. A life shared